Hello, beautiful soul. Welcome back to the Elevate Your Soul podcast. This is part 2 with Nick Broadhurst on how to keep your frequency high while your partner is going through challenges. Do you believe that you or other people can get to a stage where the relationship is just like super high vibe, like 99.9% of the time?
It's a good question, and I don't know. I don't know if anyone's been there. I don't know. I'm not sure. I think that
Yeah.
I think we have to acknowledge that the universe has been created around the principle of polarity.
Mm-hmm.
So to believe that we'll have one experience is denying ourselves of the other.
Right.
So it's I would say there's varying degrees of polarity, but it's always there,
Yeah. It's
right? So
interesting too, though, because your beliefs form your own reality. So if you're someone who believes that uh, you can't have a relationship like that, or you don't know anyone else who does, and maybe you don't know anyone else who does because you hold that belief that it's not true, that maybe you won't ever get there. Whereas I've adopted a belief maybe a year or a year and a half ago that is kind of my, I like to hold that as my standard, but then I do question at times. I'm like, is my standard making things harder for me because I hold this standard, or is it good because I hold that standard and I hold this belief, therefore I might actually be able to manifest that in my life one day. So it's interesting.
I hear what you're saying. I mean, you have to, yes, you do create your own reality. I think for me personally, if I think about that, holding a standard of perfection, essentially,
Right.
my fear would be that I'm trying to live up to a fantasy,
Right. Right.
you know,
And I guess
and
that's the thing. It's like my belief will definitely look like fantasy to other people.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that
So
doesn't mean it can't be true for you. You know, anything's possible.
exactly. And
I just believe that there's like an oscillation between the polarities. So
right.
there is times where you just feel like that oscillation is very, like it's a much bigger wavelength,
Yeah.
you know, much bigger peaks and troughs. And then there's times where there's the tiny oscillations,
Right.
just tiny, and it can feel absolutely. We have periods where, because I think from this discussion we focused around moving through
Mm.
periods of challenge, right? That's been the focus of this conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess it's probably made it sound like our relationship's always struggling, but it's not. It's not.
Yeah.
There's just an acknowledgement that there are shifts taking place.
Totally.
And for a lot of the time, I would say 90% of the time, if not more, it's hard to put a number on it, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Those oscillations between the different peaks and troughs are tiny.
Yeah.
And we live the majority of the time in a state of happiness, I guess is the best way it is to say it. I could say bliss and all these other things, but I really just think it's happy, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. Totally. That's the
But
goal.
then there's other periods where that 10% feels more exaggerated,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know. Um, so yeah, my only concern with that belief of perfection would be it could be a fantasy and you'll never meet it. That's my only concern.
Exactly.
That's my
And
own
that's,
personal.
yeah. And I see both sides. Like, am
Yeah,
I holding this standard that I'll never achieve, or am I holding the standard that no one else believes in, that no one else strives for, but that means that I'll be in that 0.01% of relationships? And to me, it's like the perfect relationship doesn't mean no one there's ever miscommunication or anything, but a perfect
right.
relationship to me is people's intention. There's never an intention to manipulate. There's never an intention to make the other person feel bad because they made you feel bad, or the intention that when you are struggling through something, that your intention is to bring up the vibration back to a higher frequency as soon as you can. A perfect relationship to me is taking responsibility when you are going through something and not relying on your partner to absorb your stress or pick you up when they're not really involved in the situation that made you feel bad in the first place. So I guess I don't mean like never have any problems, but perfect relationship to me is, I just guess, all those values, having all those values.
Well, that was fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, because I would say then that we have a perfect relationship.
Oh, nice. Love that.
So I
Yeah,
should have asked you to define perfect, because your perfect is different to what I was thinking.
totally.
My
Right.
perfect was, I was thinking zero adversity.
No, no, just like pick it up. Like don't drag it on. Like my ex was a genius at finding an issue out of nowhere and then dragging it on. So I guess that's why it kind of propelled me into the opposite direction of like, okay, I want someone who, you know, doesn't try to make a problem out of nothing. And when there is a problem, try to fix it as soon as possible and not loads it all on top of their partner. Like, oh, I have an issue. Here it is. Like, help me. Taking a bit of responsibility of like, maybe I can figure this out myself. Maybe I'm going to go for a walk before I enter the door when I'm coming home from work. And maybe that walk will change my vibration so that when I come home and walk through the door, you know, my wife or my partner won't be affected by that negatively. She'll open me with open arms, and just little things like that make such a big difference.
So it's interesting now that I'm clear on your definition. I would, as I said, I feel like based on that, then we do have a perfect relationship. But
Right.
my own definition then would change.
Right.
Not definition of perfect, because I wouldn't use that word, but
Yeah.
my aspirations
Yeah.
for my relationship would be to take your core set of values that you just expressed,
Yeah.
and to have less reliance on those things.
Right. Right.
There's less need
Mm,
to take responsibility. There's less need to take that walk, whatever it is,
right.
right?
Right. Right.
Um, so I think that is the decreasing of the oscillations I was talking about would
Mm,
be what I aspire to. Um, so it's fascinating to hear you talk about that, because those things have become foundational for us, everything you said.
yeah. Yeah.
And in fact, were foundational for us when we met. It just took us a little while to be able to articulate that they were our core values.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I think it is important to have some kind of goal like that. Like, but just
Yeah.
not to be super obsessed with it. So like if there is an issue in the relationship or in life or whatever, not to be like, oh darn, like this is like not how it's supposed to be. Like just being like, okay, I'm gonna go with this. This is what's happening now. How do we work through this, you know, calmly and swiftly. But I think it is
Well,
good to have that little goal, because I feel like that's gonna help you manifest that. Like when, because I
yeah.
do a lot of like, I call it intentional dreaming, and I like have these visualizations of what I want to feel like in my relationship when I'm older and when I have kids and things like that. And I feel like having that goal, that desire of peace and calmness and responsibility and communication and relationship, that you'll manifest that more if you hold that to your, I don't want to say standard, but you know, if you have that
Well,
belief.
I know exactly what you're saying, because before I met Melissa, I was doing exactly that. So your
Yeah.
intentional dreaming is, I guess, another way of really sort of talking about visualization in a sense, but it's not just visualizing, it's living in the state,
Yeah.
experiencing that feeling, what it is. I'm assuming
Exactly.
that's what you mean, yeah?
Yep. Totally. Totally.
So
Yeah.
I would, at the end of all my meditations before I met Melissa, I would go into that state where I would feel the feeling of what it is to have what I desire. So, for example, if it was music, it'd be me on stage doing my encore and hearing the audience and feeling not so much the applause for my validation, but the feeling of what it is to be on stage. And
Yeah.
so I would live in the feeling of that. And then I'd live in the feeling of what it is to wake up next to my soulmate, to make love to my soulmate, to be cooking in the kitchen with my soulmate. I would live with the feeling of that, if
Yeah.
just for 30 seconds.
Yeah. It's so
And
powerful, right? Even
it
for a
is
short
powerful,
period
because
of time.
if you generate the feeling, not just a thought, but the feeling, the universe, you're giving the universe no choice. It has to respond.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I 100% agree with you that I don't think I would be in this relationship if I didn't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I would have many of the things that I have in my
Well,
life
obviously, you must have
because of
held
that.
that belief if you left your wife that there was something more in alignment for you, right?
Well, not really. I
Okay.
was no, I think when that relationship dissolved, it dissolved because of pain
Right.
and a lack of awareness.
Right.
Even though I've grown up with this sort of, I guess, knowledge, I've been around it with my father, who's um I don't know if I'd call him spiritual. He's pretty out there. Let's say that.
Yeah.
But in a good way.
Yeah.
And so I've been surrounded by this, and I think I knew in that previous relationship that there was more, but I just pushed it so deep that it forced me to hold up that relationship as the center of my universe because I was
Yeah.
like ignoring all those parts of me.
Yeah.
And so when that inevitably broke, because I was living in a fantasy world essentially,
Yeah.
when it did break, when the fantasy became an illusion to me, well, yeah, I guess it did. Then my world crumbled because I had dreamt of things being a certain way that was never possible.
Okay.
And
Not possible with her or not
not
possible?
with her, not
Okay.
with her, not
Okay.
with her. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because my core values were not aligned with her core values. But I
Mm,
can only see that now because at the time I tried to change my core values and I
right.
convinced myself that mine were the same, but they weren't.
Right. Right. That's
Like I was
interesting.
manipulating myself to be mediocre, to allow myself to be mediocre in a
Right.
relationship,
Yeah.
to allow myself to have a mediocre relationship. I
Hmm.
had to convince myself that I was a different person to who I actually was.
Right. Right.
And
That's such a good question to ask on the first date. What are your core values? List them out. Let's see if they match.
100%.
If they don't.
Yeah, like tell me, what do you think about marriage? What do you think about monogamy? What do you think about having children? What do you think about money? What are your beliefs around parenting?
Yeah.
What are your beliefs around self-love? You
More
know,
importantly, what's your relationship like with your parents and yourself? Those are the first two things I want to
yeah,
know.
it's
Yeah.
true. But
Hmm.
again, as well, like the trick with that question with the parents is that
Yeah.
you can be the person who's broken from that lineage.
Right. The change.
There could be patterns have been repeating for generations, and you've been the one who's broken from that. So you
Totally.
may have no relationship with your parents,
Yeah.
but that could be a very positive thing.
Oh, and that's not a negative thing. If they said I
Yeah,
don't, then you just
yeah,
need to ask them why. And then I guess more so the relationship you had with your parents as a kid. That's always interesting. But yeah,
yeah.
just to see, yeah. Yeah. How like have you worked on your childhood traumas? What are you doing to uplift your spirit every single day? What are you doing to elevate your soul every single day? That's something I like to
Or
ask
do you
too.
have childhood traumas? Because
Right.
for me personally, there are things which left a bit of a void
Uh-huh.
in the way I was brought up, but they're not traumatic.
Okay.
There were things that I had to find as an adult and fill in for myself.
Yeah.
But
With your
I've
life
definitely had no
traumas, then would you say they were in your childhood or in your adulthood? Your biggest traumas?
adulthood.
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Because some people would suggest that that trauma still stems from something that happened in your childhood because to make it that traumatic, it triggers something that happened to you. And maybe it was something when you were still in your mother's womb. Maybe that's why you're not aware of it. I don't know. It's just a theory. Just another thing
It
I'm throwing
is.
out there. Yeah.
No, it is, and I've witnessed a lot of inner child work that's been done, and how powerful that can be, and how things can be buried so deeply that a huge trauma can come up, and you didn't even see it, and you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
that is significant trauma. I wasn't even aware of it, and I've witnessed that with different people.
Yeah.
Um, I just haven't had it for myself, and I don't think I'm repressing anything.
Mhm.
I haven't had those traumas. Was there something as a in the womb, or I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
But what I can, excuse me, what I can know for sure is that as an adult, I have the choice to take responsibility in that moment for how I am, who I am, and why I'm behaving a certain way.
Totally.
Um, but it's not always that easy for people
Yeah.
because I've seen what childhood trauma can do. I've seen
But trauma, and as a child, it doesn't always have to be something really, really traumatic. But as
no,
a child's mind, it can be something as simple as like your mom giving your toy to Salvation
yeah,
Army or something, and then
yeah,
put that
yeah.
toy, you know?
I
Yeah,
know, I know, it's crazy. I've
yeah,
definitely seen small things become big things.
exactly.
But for me personally, I've just really struggled to identify with any significant moments. I'm sure there is something there,
Right.
and there are things that weren't discussed or expressed that I've had to, not, I wouldn't say heal, but just almost cultivate within myself.
Mm.
And I've been very, very aware of these things. It was a very different, the way that I was brought up was very loving. For example, I'd never heard the words "I love you." Whereas
Oh,
now for my child, for Leo, I just smother him in that,
yeah, yeah,
you know. Um, maybe maybe I'm making up for it, doing too much. I don't know,
yeah.
um, but also, sex wasn't discussed in our household.
Mm. Mm.
It was naughty.
Not many households it is discussed, sadly.
No.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I had to.
And do you talk about that with your son now? Have you already talked to him about
We
what
do, we
sex is?
do. Yes, we're very, very open about that, and it's like dinner table conversation sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
totally. Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but for me, I was very aware as a. This wasn't until after going through a divorce and having to heal my own physical body because I had a huge amount of physical stress at the time.
yeah.
I became very aware of a blockage that was very much a heart-based blockage.
Okay.
So there was a level of there was a block that was stopping me from being seen, being vulnerable, and being affectionate.
Yeah, yeah.
So would you call that trauma? Maybe, right?
Maybe, yeah,
Maybe,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. To the perspective of a young child, that could be trauma. Yeah, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So
One
there's
more,
definitely things like that. Yeah,
yeah. One more thing I would like to ask, touching on this perfect, perfect relationship. This relationship that is very high vibe, that doesn't have very much frustration in it, or constant debating or arguing or whatever. When you're in a relationship with yourself, when you're single, how often, when you, I don't know how long you've been single for in your lifetime, but do you remember like a long period of time, say 6 months, whatever, where you were single, where you were high vibe all the time, where you'd come home and you'd be in a high vibe, you'd be home, you'd be in a high vibe, you'd go to bed happy, you'd wake up happy? Do you have that when you were by yourself? Did you ever have that?
no, because again, I think it comes down to that whole question around polarity.
Okay.
Because I may have been single and cultivating as much as I could, and I did have that period, not for very long, mind you, maybe 4 months.
Yeah. Okay.
Not a huge amount of time, but it was a very intense period of growth for me
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
before I met Melissa.
Yeah.
But in that period, I was still dealing with the fallout of a divorce and having to.
So
This
true.
is still years later, but still having to share a child.
So true.
Um,
So,
so there was always something. I can be experiencing that, but there's always something else that was
yeah.
challenging that state.
Yeah. Can I ask then, when you and Melissa are in different cities or not spending time together in the same house, if you're traveling or whatever, she's traveling, how do you find, because I always find that really interesting when you're apart from your partner. My partner works half the time in Singapore, so I get,
Yes.
this whole place to myself. It's just me and Chi Chi. And it's interesting to like realize how strongly your partner impacts you and your everyday state, and then realizing how that may possibly change when they're not there, and how that changes. So when you're on your own, do you find you're not triggered by other people, by other things? Do you find that it's easy for you to stay really high vibe? Do you have that experience, or do you still have like challenges and you're like, oh, I miss my partner and traffic's upsetting me, like that kind of thing? Or how is that
I
when you're
think
just on your own in your own
I
energy?
think that would have I think that would affect Melissa more than it affects me personally.
Okay.
We seem to have about a 10-day limit where all of a sudden it starts to be felt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time apart. We spend 30 to 40% of our time apart because of,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
my son lives in a different state. So I go down and we were just speaking about this, before this call, I was telling you what had happened this week, how we had to pack up our home in Sydney, not pack it up, actually, we had to sell everything in
Yeah.
2 days,
Yeah.
um, and put the stuff we wanted to keep in a car and drive for 12 hours to get across the border. Um, and so we had this whole life in Sydney, which we don't have anymore. And now
Wow.
I'll still be doing that travel, but I'll be doing Airbnb. So I'll still be away for
Okay.
30 to 40% of the
Oh,
time.
so Leo doesn't, I thought he came to your household.
He does, excuse me,
Yeah.
he does in the school holidays.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But during school, obviously, he needs that stability in Sydney. So he has his mother's home.
Yeah.
He had our home, but now he's going to have his mother's home and the Airbnb, which I get.
Oh,
So
okay. So you'll have one-on-one time when you have your son.
100%. So it's been amazing for our relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
He's 14. We're very, very close.
Oh, that's so
Um,
cool.
he's very much a mini me,
Yeah.
but very different and way smarter. but but
Yeah.
we have a limit, Melissa and I, because I do 2 weeks generally, 2 to 3 weeks away,
Okay.
and 10 days tends to be that point where I notice in her that it starts to shift.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks is where I start shifting,
Yeah.
and I
Okay, so
tend to
that's
come home.
really interesting to ask. I didn't know that you had that time apart. So, and I have that with my primary partner in my relationship. And I personally find it very easy to just constantly be high vibe, like, because it's
Yeah.
just, right? So I'm not triggered. I'm really good. I have the tools that I need to pick up my vibration. I'll blast the music, I'll dance. Um, so for me, and I think that's why I hold this belief that I can have a partner that, one day that it's just so high vibe all the time. And I feel like if you're someone who, when you're on your own, you can hold that. And I don't mean perfect as in like never anything bad happens, but for the majority, you're just super happy, energetic, energized, positive, go, 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 but in a good way. And then, obviously calming down too. I'm not always go, go, go. I'm not neurotic, but I think if you can hold that in your own space and realize that nothing really bothers you, I feel that that's, I guess, why I hold this new belief, because I never used to have it, because I used to be on my own and I'd get depressed, and a friend would annoy me, or this text would annoy me, or whatever. There'd always be something in life that would come as a struggle and totally bring down my vibration. And then I'm at a place now where I can be on my own and I will just stay so high vibe, like so high vibe. So I guess that's why that belief came in. Like, if I can find someone who can stay so high vibe on their own, potentially, if you'd be the perfect match, maybe you could get there one day, you know?
Well, yes, I know what you want to experience. um, and I
Yeah.
don't want to be the one to like shatter any dreams, but at the same time, I feel like it's very easy to stay in that state when you're not being challenged,
When you're by yourself. Yeah.
because you're not having the challenge.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, if you're going to be in a relationship with someone, like, sure, if you're on your own, you don't have the mirror there every
Yeah.
day
Yeah.
reflecting back at you the things that you're not seeing within yourself,
Totally. Totally.
right?
Yeah.
The minute that you go into relationship, what you are really going into relationship with is a very shiny mirror,
Yeah.
and that mirror is going to shine the light on areas that you don't see without them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, is it possible, just because two high vibe people come together, that that means there won't be any challenges? I would say that is a fantasy,
Right. Interesting. Yeah.
because
And
two high vibe people will be very shiny mirrors on each other.
yeah.
And you'll
Yeah.
go, I didn't even see that within myself, but that person just reflects it so easily because they have it within themselves and I don't have it within me. And if I didn't see them, I would never have seen that within myself.
Right.
And so Melissa and I came together, two very high vibe people,
Right.
just like you're saying.
Right.
And the majority of our relationship is in that state.
Is in that state. Yeah.
But at the same time,
You're each other's.
where's the growth if
Yeah.
you're not challenged?
Yeah. Yeah.
We're
And
here
I
to
guess
grow.
it's how you deal with those challenges too. And I guess that's what I mean by you wouldn't necessarily want to be in a relationship where you're not challenged, but it's how you go about those challenges. Are you going to welcome them and be like, oh yeah, growth, come on? Or are you going to be like, no, get away from me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
And,
here's the trick.
yeah.
If you do have that person come into your life where you feel like, wow, I've got two high vibe people coming together,
Right.
the minute that something challenges you more than you were ready for,
Right.
if you're living within the what I think is a fantasy that things can be perfect,
Yeah.
high vibe all the time,
Yeah.
the minute that it's not, it's going to be very hard to deal with that.
Not necessarily, because it's not that it needs to always be high vibe, but it's so when something comes that's it's hard to stay in a positive space. It's like, how can we deal with that? How can we take responsibility? Let's put all our
Sure,
intentions, let's make our intentions pure and our intentions meaningful, and let's be productive about this. Let's not swim in self-pity for a few days just because we want to feel
sure.
sorry for ourselves. That kind of
Yeah, yeah.
let's elevate this back. It's a challenge. Great. How are we gonna deal with this? Let's keep moving. Let's keep swimming. You know,
Well,
that
I
kind
think
of
what you're really describing is just a very conscious relationship,
super conscious. Super
you
conscious.
know?
Hell
And
yeah.
yeah, I think and that is absolutely 100% achievable.
Achievable, yeah. And when you're on
100%.
your own, then can I ask again, do you find yourself in a positive high vibe? Because as you said, it's easier when you don't have that shiny mirror and you aren't being challenged. How is
Sure.
that when you're on your own?
I would say that I would say I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm just kind of chill, just kind of neutral, you
Yeah.
know? And I
Yeah.
think as well, we have to remember that there is going to be differences between men and women are going to have a different reaction to that
Uh-huh.
because we are inherently just made up of different energies.
Uh-huh.
And the masculine, a lot of the time, can just be quite content, knows what he's doing, stays on path,
Uh-huh.
just keeps moving forward
Yeah.
towards the goal.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's just not enough for the feminine,
Right.
right?
Right.
The feminine needs more movement, needs more
Right.
things going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Needs to
Yeah.
dance and flow more, and the masculine doesn't need that all the time.
Right.
So sometimes, if you're looking at the relationship you're describing, I feel like if you have two people, when I tune into you, if you have someone like you come into that picture,
Yeah.
where is the balance?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Because
I'm very the doshas, right? I'm Vata, and
yeah,
I can only see myself ever being with Kapha. So my two partners now are Kapha,
oh yeah, yeah,
and my last partner was Kapha. I'm very attracted. Friends, I can do anything, but I need someone who's like chill, like goes with the flow. But that's why we're so attracted to each other, because they're like, wow, this girl's so high in energy and always wants to go
right,
on adventures and has that juice and that spice. And then I'm actually attracted to the calm, relaxed, the rock of the relationship, like super grounded, like super chill. I actually like that. I don't need like a high, when I say high vibe, I don't need like a neurotic vata energy. Like I
yeah,
can't do that. I actually don't do well with people like that for too long of a period of time. I actually need someone who's very grounded and very calm. And that's the polarity that I need.
yeah,
But I just mean high vibe, that you can be grounded and you can be calm and you can even be bored, but your vibration can still be different. You can be bored and have a
100%,
vibration of a low vibration. You can be bored and have a higher vibration. I feel like,
100%.
and I'm very energetic, and that's just why I'm so sensitive. That's why I wanted to do this topic, is like I absorb energies from people I spend time with, and that's why I'm very fussy with who I spend time with, because I realize like whatever state that person's in right now, I'm going to absorb that and I'm going to feel that for however long until I'm going to work on that. So, and then when living with someone, it's just so crucial to me that that person takes as much responsibility as I can, and I guess to have that same priority as you were saying, have the same values. I guess it's I look at it as priorities as well. Is your priority to be really happy? Or is your priority to put food on the table for your kids? Or is your priority to make a certain amount of money? And then where does this happiness fall into that priority list? Is it beneath making money, or is it above making money? It's that, I think
Sure.
that's really
Which
important
is,
as well.
again, which comes down to core values, right?
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and I think I can feel exactly what it is that you're seeking.
Right.
And we are trying in this dialogue, trying to find a middle ground
Mm,
between our own core values, our own beliefs.
yeah.
The only thing that's putting us off a little bit is that your definition that you're using, or the words you're using,
Right.
for me, I define differently. But
Okay.
when you explain it properly, like you just did a couple of
Right.
times, you said, well, I meant this, this, and this.
Okay. Yeah.
Every time you say it like that, what I'm seeing is you're just seeking a conscious relationship where people take responsibility for themselves and their actions,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And
Totally.
they're committed to growth, and they're
Mhm.
committed to showing up as the best version of themselves every day.
Right. So
And I
you're
would say
bursting my
that
bubble now. You're like, maybe it is possible.
100%. I mean, I think,
Maybe she's not crazy.
no, I just think that what you're seeking is, to be honest, I feel like that's what I have.
Yeah. Beautiful.
But what I want to express back to you is that when you have that, doesn't mean you won't be challenged. And I know you don't. I know
Yeah.
you're not saying that. I know
Right.
you're not saying.
Right.
Just that
Yeah.
the challenge is not negative. It's not bad. The challenge is there so that I can grow as an individual.
Yeah.
And so, me choosing to be in partnership with you, marry, or whatever you do, it doesn't matter. I'm in partnership with Melissa for
Yeah.
life. And me doing that was a choice to grow and become the best person I possibly could in this lifetime.
Yeah.
I believe I'll grow much faster and be a much better person in this world with Melissa as my companion,
Totally. Totally.
because she is so many things that she's so natural at, I'm not, and vice versa.
Yeah. Totally.
So I can aspire to have those qualities within myself,
Yeah.
right? So I think what you're seeking is totally 100% normal. It's normal.
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
normal, right? I think it's just the semantics, the definitions that are being used.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
But when you dig into it, it's like, it's totally normal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just, hang on, let me say that again.
Common.
It's totally achievable
Yeah.
and should be normal, but maybe it's not that normal.
Right.
Maybe
Right.
it's not common, sorry.
Not that common. Yeah. I don't like the word
Maybe.
normal too much.
Maybe, yeah. And I don't want to say too much around being common, because I think that's passing judgment on other people's relationships and journeys.
Right.
I don't think what I have is better than what anyone else has. It's just different,
Yeah. Yeah. Do
and
you feel like
it serves my purpose.
totally, totally. Do you feel it is easier though to overcome challenges when you're faced with challenges in a conscious relationship when both partners are conscious?
Um,
Because challenges in an unconscious relationship can result in a lot of closing, defensiveness, uh, using tools, or resulting to addictions to overcome those triggers and challenges.
so
Uh,
facing challenges in conscious versus unconscious. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
yeah,
Oh,
that's
sorry,
what I'm saying.
I thought
Like,
you meant
the more
individual.
conscious you
Oh, yeah,
are and the person you're in a relationship with, the easier
yeah,
and I guess the quicker as well it is to overcome the challenges. And that's guess what
100%.
I mean by that perfect relationship. It's not that there's no challenges, but when they're faced, it's like you welcome them, you're conscious of them, you're aware of them as soon as they arise, not 3 days later, not weeks later, and you wonder why haven't we have sex for 3 weeks? It's kind of, you catch it straight away, like, oh, this is something that's going on. How do
Yeah,
we deal with this? That kind of, yeah.
yeah, 100%. I thought you meant handling those challenges in a conscious relationship versus being on your own. But if you're in an unconscious relationship where both parties are not even willing to look at themselves and just
Uh,
want to blame and project,
yeah.
I mean, projection is so uncomfortable,
Yeah.
and doesn't really breed anything particularly positive. So, yes, absolutely, because if you're willing to listen and learn from your partner, then in those times they will be there and they will reflect back what you need to hear about yourself,
Mm, yeah.
but not as a coach, Because often, it's easy to fall into this sort of coaching. You want to coach your partner through something you just can't coach, because
Mm,
coaching is unsolicited.
right. What do you mean by that?
They did they ask for it, or did you just deliver the information without
Right.
being asked?
Right. Yeah.
Do you have their permission to coach, or are you
Hmm.
just coaching because you have the information and you want to dispense with it?
Right.
You've got to have, for someone to be able to absorb something, there's got to be worthy inquiry from their end.
Right. Exactly.
And
Exactly.
that worthy inquiry is the permission to then not coach, but to dispense guidance.
Because
And
then we're most
often,
likely going to listen and actually apply.
yeah, often I will start saying something. Melissa will say, "Can you not coach me right now?"
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And
Interesting.
I'll remember that she didn't ask me for my opinion or my advice.
Right.
You know,
Interesting, because I have that with the relationship with my mother, more so since I was older, but she kind of gives me tough love, and I guess I bring that on a little bit with my partners, but and she'll do that little bit of coaching, but I see it almost as reminding me of what I already know, and I actually really enjoy it. So instead of being like, "Oh mom, but I just want to vent right now," I'll have that moment where I'm like, "Oh, I just need to vent," and she'll be like, "Hey, be grateful. Hey, count your blessings." She said that to me once and I tattooed it because it just stuck with me. Count your blessings. And I'm actually so thankful. I'm like, oh my God, mom, like, thank you for being like, thanks for being real and holding me accountable. And I really like that in a partnership as well. Someone who holds you accountable. Whereas some people are a little bit more like, oh, I just want to be heard. Like, don't coach me. But I long more for that. Like, for someone to just be like, Arel, grow up. Yes.
well, I guess it depends as well. Like, if you're venting, that can be the inquiry.
Right. Oh, and
You
that
know,
can
may not be
help. That
asking.
can help. Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
may not be asking for help or advice, but just the
Right.
venting may be the invitation for someone to say, I hear what you're saying, but if you ever thought about this, or
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, if someone's just say suffering and you can see it and you just start dispensing advice,
Right.
you're like, you know, and so yeah, 100%. I mean, there's always a time and place for it. Just knowing when to be. I think in a relationship, the coaching is never. It's hard for coaching to be a good thing in relationships. I feel like coaching it can be it can feel like someone's coming from a place of superiority as opposed to
Right.
just um
That's so true.
delivering. You just want to be. I
Heard.
guess it comes back to the mirror. Like, just be the mirror.
Mm. Do
you
you
know
believe, do you, are you for relationships that hold each other accountable?
oh, of course, yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
Right. So
yeah.
yeah, it's fine. I guess there's a fine
it's a
line
fun
between trying to coach and holding someone accountable. Yeah.
it's a fine line. Yeah, it's a very fine line. I
Mm.
think you know it when you're doing
Right. Right.
it.
Wow, so interesting. We covered so much more than
We
I thought.
did.
Like I had like two questions on my paper and I just, yeah, went with it. That was so good. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Hey YouTube fam, if you like this video, make sure to hit the like button below. And if you think a friend, a family member, or just someone you know who could benefit from this podcast episode, please share this video with them. And if you've been enjoying the Elevate Your Soul podcast, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel for new episodes weekly.